What's going on, guys? Today we're going to be talking about metaphysics. Um, this is going to be one of my videos on philosophy. I do really enjoy talking about and discussing and researching philosophy, and that's what this video is going to be about. I definitely picked one of the harder ones, one of the more abstract ones to start with, but this is going to be the first video, and I'm going to do it in a PowerPoint format because I'm not the best at editing yet. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and let me know if there's anything you think I missed, what you want to see in the future, any philosophies or anything really, any content you want to see in the future. So we're gonna start off with metaphysics. What is it? What are they? So this picture right here, I kind of think it is a good picture because some people see a rabbit, some people see a duck. It kind of depends on how you look at it, and I think that really kind of shows the broad perspective of metaphysics because metaphysics can kind of mean like, what is our perspective on reality? What is our perspective on life? What does it mean to be alive? Is this a duck or a rabbit, or could it be something entirely different? You know. So it's all about your being. So being between us, knowing different things, knowing the idea of knowing what it means to know something. Because some people say, we don't truly know something. And identity. What is identity? Do we have personal identities, or is every identity to every human kind of a collective? Are we all different, or are we individual collective? Your cultural identity. You know, your national identity, the identity that you use for your politics, the identity of what area you live in, the construction of your place, the construction of your identity, what studies are used to find what, the findings of different studies, papers that explore certain things, um, article, articles, research, your cultural traditions, your rural identities, your local, and the role you have in society, and the role that your identity has in you. And how can you change your identity? What's the community that, how does it influence you? And construction and constructing different things, constructing research and finding new ways to kind of involve yourself in society. And what does it mean to construct an identity? What is an identity? Is it your personality? Is it what you're interested in? Is it everything that makes you you? I mean, if you lost your memory, would you have an old identity and now a new one, or would it all fall back in place? You know, ethically speaking, why do we believe in the things we do? You know, urbanly speaking, why do we believe certain things? Why there's certain things that are taboo in society, and why there's certain things that are looked an act of kindness, and there's things that are looked at as an act of selfishness. But it's almost different for everybody. And so why is that? So we ask a couple questions. What is existence? What does it mean to exist? Are we experiencing existence? Do we exist? I mean, how would you know if somebody existed? That's not really something you can test. I mean, yeah, you can look at somebody and be like, that person exists, I'm looking at them. But can we observe existence if we're experiencing it ourselves? I mean, think about that. If you're a character in a TV show, you can't watch the TV show because you are the TV show. You're experiencing the existence of being in a TV show. So how can you observe it yourself? That would almost be like something like maybe breaking the fourth wall. But even then, they were written to break the fourth wall. The writer wrote them that way. The voice actor acted them that way. They're not technically real. They're more of a construct that was used to break the fourth wall. Um, let's see. There is your reality. What is your reality? How does reality exist? What type of reality do we live in? How does reality work? Is our existence related to our reality? See, reality I think is a little more individualistic. Your reality could be something like, you believe in this or you believe in that for one reason or another. But what does that really mean? I think our experience shapes our reality, and our reality shapes our experience. If you were born in a certain area, you're going to have different experiences, but then those experiences are what influence you to change the way you live your life, which causes you to have new experiences. And so how does this all relate to each other? And what is the process of your identity and how that relates to your reality, and how does everything affect you? Because we get affected politically, culturally, nationally, ethically, all the time. And how can we examine our life in ways that kind of show how we think and who we are. Does space exist? So, and I don't mean outer space, I don't mean something like that, but the space of being like, if there's empty space, does that mean something has to exist to fill it? Because if that's not the case, then space wouldn't be a thing. It would just be the constant of being, if that makes any sense. So, for example, it's like if every single jar on Earth was empty, would they really be empty, or is that just how a jar is? Are jars empty in nature, or are they just made to be a jar and then you fill the jar? Because you can't really have space without something to fill the space. But what if there's just space and nothing to? And is that the case? Does space even exist? I try not to be too confusing on that one and try to get across what I mean by that. And does space need something to exist inside of it for it to be space? So if you removed it, then you would have space. But if there's nothing to ever remove, then would that space really exist as a space? Or would it just be, you know, almost like a void maybe? So this calls in mind, how was the universe created? Well, the universe, a lot of people think these questions are a little abstract. How was the universe created? Some people believe in God. Me personally, I'm Christian. I do believe in God, the Christian God, and that's how I believe the universe, or even just the galaxy or the solar system was created. Are these questions too abstract? Does asking these questions really solve anything? What does it say about the people that are asking these questions? Why are they asking questions like this and not questions like, how can I survive today, or how will I eat tomorrow? Is it a privilege to ask these questions? If somebody's asking these questions, they're not in survival mode. They're just bored to a certain degree. But there has been times in history where philosophers, even people that don't know how they're going to survive the day, still ask these questions. I mean, there have been times in history where people didn't know if they were going to wake up alive, but they still ask these questions. A lot of these questions are from centuries ago, decades ago at least, and people are asking, why are they alive? And if they're going to live, if we're so inclined to live and enjoy life and want to survive, what is causing us to feel that way? Even if you're a millionaire, or if you are, you know, poor and you don't know how you're going to eat tomorrow, you're still asking, what are you doing this for? Because we have a purpose of living. We have enjoying life, experiencing life, experiencing life through our perspective. And then maybe, a poor person's purpose could just be to improve, get a house. If they're homeless, maybe get a house, get a car. Millionaire could be to open another business, could be to invest more. But why would you want to do that? Maybe it's for the people around you, maybe for yourself. But it's still like, it's always just that one question asking why. And even if there's not an answer, it still exists in the back of our mind. So I don't think they're too abstract. I just think we haven't really discovered enough about them. Are these questions important or a distraction? Everything, in a way, is a distraction. Some things like eating, working, not necessarily a distraction, because working is kind of how you survive. But anything we really do for fun, fishing, sports, boating, swimming, video games, talking about something like this. Yes, I think it can be a distraction, but I also do think that the distraction itself is the reason that we're enjoying it. Okay, because anything can be labeled as a distraction. That's not one of the four needs. Food, shelter, um, air, and water. So anything can be a distraction. And I also want to mention that the idea and dialogue around metaphysics has spiked in the last 7 years. In 2019, the dialogue around metaphysics has spiked. The word itself has gone up. It's been Googled more than it ever has in history. So that is showing that more people are interested in it, more people want to know what it's about, and more people are enjoying the discussion around it. And that's not to say it hasn't always been popular. It has been popular ever since the idea was conceived. So it's just interesting seeing how much more popular it is. And with all the information out there right now, I made this, research PowerPoint, and I barely scratched the surface. So let's talk about the origins. So this is Aristotle, a picture I found from him. So the Greek translation, which is the original, is the things after the physics, which I think is interesting because, people are so obsessed with science, they're so obsessed with experiments, doing scientific research and testing things that they can physically prove and even like hold in their hand. But what's like why would we do like what comes after that? Science only goes so far. That I mean, biology, social sciences, psychology, philosophy, maybe even. These things go back farther and farther and farther. But how do we know why we're doing them and what they were doing them from? So it's the things after the physics. It's after you figure out, okay, we have the equations, we have the numbers down, but why? What do these numbers mean? Why did we even create these numbers? It can be a little abstract sometimes, but it's just kind of the thing of like asking why. Why we did this, why we did that. So the medieval Latin term, it got changed in the 16th century. It became metaphysics when it became. So it started off as a Greek, then it went into medieval Latin, which is kind of the word metaphysics just spelled differently, and now it's metaphysics, and that kind of started around the 16th century. So Aristotle's works, I think he has some works called "The Science of Things Transcending What Is Physical or Natural." So, and that begs the question: what is natural? What do we perceive as natural? What do we perceive as unnatural? Some might say technology is unnatural, but that technology comes straight from the things we find in nature. I mean, is the cave natural? Some people would say, yeah. Is the metal in it natural? Yeah. So we take that metal, we take the wood, which is natural, off of trees and plants, and we make something like a table. Is that table natural then? You could say no because it was altered. Well, who altered it? Human beings? Well, are human beings natural? I mean, it can be a little circular and it can drive you crazy, obviously. It can drive you crazy, obviously. These questions aren't always meant to be taken literally. Sometimes they're meant to just be fun and just kind of think, what do we mean? So I kind of want to get back to the universe. So I said, is the universe real? Is it real? What does the universe even mean? Does it mean is it what we exist in? Like back to space, and then now I can kind of include outer space in that. Is it real? Is outer space real? What does outer space mean? I mean, are we experiencing it? The universe itself almost seems like a cabinet, like something that's holding something. But who knows? Is there one universe or multiple? And then this kind of goes to the next question: is there a multiverse? Is there a multiverse? Are there multiple multiverses? Some people say that there's a multiverse, an omniverse, and then it goes a lot further than that. But the interesting thing with the multiverse is if there's a multiverse, then that means there's a universe for every single decision. So they say every time you make a decision, so every time you decide to say yes instead of no, or no instead of yes to a question, that splits off and creates a new universe. Or all those universes simultaneously exist and they're all just happening at the same time. There's a couple different theories with multiverse, but me personally, I don't really know. I think the one where every universe exists at the same time and they're all just one literally so different. One atom is moved and maybe even smaller than that. One prion. I don't really know if I believe in that one. I do think it's interesting if there's a multiverse and every time you make a decision a new one splits off of that, but I don't know if we're ever going to be able to test that. We're a long way from it. Can you travel between them? Looks like I had a typo. I meant to say, can you travel between them? That kind of goes back to we won't probably ever be able to test that, and if we can, it'll be in a long, long time. Nowhere close to where we're at now. And then this is another fun kind of question I had: are there any works of fiction that are close to the process of traveling between universes? If they even exist. Now, a lot of people look at Back to the Future. Well, is time a universe? Rick and Morty, they don't really do time travel, but they do a lot of universe hopping with portals. I'm myself. I watch a lot of fiction. I enjoy a lot of media, books, movies, cartoons, anime, TV shows, everything, video games, and there's a lot of things. The game Control, the game Quantum Break, they all kind of show different things and different kind of theories on it. I mean, the show Dark, the German TV show Dark, I think it's very interesting, and the cinematic aspects they use in that show how the past affects the future, how everything's connected, the universe resets every 33 years. It's very interesting thinking about what act of fiction. I mean, imagine 3,000 years in the future, we finally figured out how to travel between universes, and then we look back at one of these shows or one of these movies, and they're like, wow, they didn't, have the whole thing figured out, but they kind of got a little closer than they should have. Maybe they knew something we didn't, or maybe it was just creativity. Sometimes creativity is better than than the procedures of science, in my opinion. So these are some important questions regarding metaphysics. So right here, you kind of see I have some atoms or some protons, electrons, neutrons. What are they? What is matter? What is something to exist? And that kind of goes with space. Is if there's space, then is space itself the matter, or does something have to exist in this space? For Does matter have to exist in space to be matter? I mean, there's that theory where if you slap a desk a certain way, all your atoms will go through it, and you'll go through it. But can that even actually happen? I mean, what is matter? Because matter can't be created or destroyed, right? But then what is space? Is space an absence of matter, or is matter the absence of space? And it's kind of like the chicken or the egg. But this all kind of goes back to what made it. And obviously I believe in God, but there's a lot of people that don't. And I just ask them, what created matter? Because they think, well, everything has a created. Humans came from maybe like an asteroid. Maybe there was life on an asteroid. Maybe the primordial soup. Humans came from that. But what what would have created the Earth? And then people say the Big Bang created the universe or the Earth or whatever. And then that's how the Earth was created. And then but what created the principle? What created the space and the matter and the principles that allowed the Earth or the universe or the galaxy or the Milky Way or the solar system? I mean, to be created. I mean, what created gravity? Because if it wasn't for gravity, we wouldn't be here. The Earth would be floating. The Earth might have hit another thing and got destroyed. But it revolves around the sun because of the gravitational pull. But how does that even work? Why would that even why would gravity? And then why does gravity exist inside the universe? Very exciting, very interesting, and exciting if we ever find more answers to these questions. And this one question right here. This is really what gets into metaphysics. Is what can we test, or what can we not test with science? Or I think I meant to put experiments, or experience. I mean, if you do something 100 times and you get the same result, one would say that's pattern recognition. Another might say you just got lucky. I mean, you can flip a coin, and no matter how many times you flip a coin, your odds are still the same for getting heads or tails. So it's just kind of interesting because you'd think after 99 times of getting tails, you finally land on heads, but you don't. So and so it's kind of like luck is something we can't really test with science or experiments. I mean, you can test kind of luck in a certain way, but luck itself is almost a skill. There's kind of two types of lucks. I mean, there's random luck where you just get struck by lightning. It's not even raining out. You just had horrible luck. But then there's luck that's kind of controlled. It's like you put yourself in a lucky situation where you might not necessarily. It's like probability control. It's very interesting. Next down is what is life. If you Google, I think life. I don't know if Google definition is still this, but if you ask somebody, if you ask like an AI or something, they'd probably say life is the preceding of death. And then, life, so death comes after life. What does that mean that life comes after death? I mean, that's something I've always thought about. Does life come after death if death comes after life? Because we see a lot of things in the world, and there's cycles, And that kind of goes back to the thing of matter can't be created or destroyed, so it's a cycle of just matter changing and energy changing. Potential energy to kinetic energy, thermal energy, I don't remember all of them, but all these different forms of energy changing. It's kind of a cycle. There's the precipitation cycle. Some people say the cycle of life. Some people say the cycle of nature. you know, Plants die. Animals, poop on the ground. They fertilize the soil. Life comes out of that. Then the plants eat then the animals eat the plant. I mean, it is a circle. So the circle of life. But what does that really mean? Is that the circle of life and death? That itself could be another circle, and that's itself is circular logic. But so far, it seems like most of these things that we don't understand, we kind of attribute a circular logic to them. Next is another important question is what is the relationship between our minds and our bodies? Is your mind in control of your body, or is your body control your mind? Well, your body is what. Well, does your body tell your? I mean, your stomach tells your mind it's ready to eat, but does your mind? Your mind's the one that kind of understands the signal. Your body sends it. Your mind. I mean, and then think of pain. I mean, if you don't have your nerves, you won't know that you're in pain. If you kind of lean, I mean, let's say you accidentally leaned on a hot table. you wouldn't know. Your hand would burn off. And there's actually a movie that just came out about that called Novocaine, which I do want to watch, but I don't really know. I'd really love to see like a, and I'm sure there might be a movie out there, but I'd really like to see a actual like the hardness of not feeling pain, like the hardship of it, because we think things like danger and pain they're not necessarily bad. They're more of just warnings, you know? When you're scared of something, when you're running away because you saw something creepy or weird, it's your body telling you to get out of there because it might be unsafe, it could be dangerous. But that's our mind. Our mind is perceiving something as dangerous and it's telling our body to run, get out of there. So the relationship between our mind and our body are very codependent. Okay, because people that are in a wheelchair that don't have their bodies, or that can't move anything, or that are paralyzed, some people say their minds get stronger, and then people who, a lot of times in fiction, people that aren't very smart and people that even have maybe mental issues, they're shown as having this type of strength that is a little, you know, above average, better than everybody. Giants are usually seen as dumb, but giants would have bigger brains. But the bigger the brain, does that mean you're smarter? I mean, and brain doesn't even mean mind. Mind can be something else. Mind can be more of a identity of the brain, because the brain is more of like, I think, kind of an information codex maybe, and then the mind is what the little voice in your head telling you, okay, we like playing basketball, we don't like playing football. Or we like this food, we don't like that food, but that also goes off of our taste buds. And a lot of our taste buds like certain things that aren't even good for us. And our mind, it'll make us do drugs and drink alcohol that is bad for our body. So they can go against each other, and when that happens, usually it's not good. I could talk about that for hours, but let's just go to the next question. Are we the same person we were yesterday? So, mentally speaking, I'd say I'm probably not. I think every day I learn something new. Just doing this PowerPoint, I'm definitely learning something about myself and new. I'm learning, so much every day. I like to just research stuff, just look into stuff, and just find out new things. But does that mean I'm a different person? I still have the same curiosity I did yesterday. But what if you lost your memory? Now that would be your memory. That would be a very different situation. You could be fundamentally different than you were yesterday, or you could be fundamentally different than you were a year ago. Are we the same? If we're the same person we were yesterday, but we're not the same person we were a year ago, when did we change? You know, I wouldn't say I'm the same person I was yesterday. I wouldn't say I'm the same person I was 10 years ago. When did that change happen? Did it happen after 3 years? Did it happen after 3 days? That's really kind of what, when is your personality? I mean, it's small changes over time, and a lot of times it's kind of what affects us. Oh, you finally turned 18. You can do this, do that. You can join the military. You finally turned 21. Now you can drink alcohol. You turn 26. You can rent a car. You turned, you know, you turned, or you grew up. You went from high school to college, or you went from middle school to high school. How does that affect us? That changes us, which in turn changes the thing around us, and that's another cycle. It's kind of like a cycle of cause and effect, and that's a good to what I'm going to talk about next. Let's talk about causality. So causality kind of relates to metaphysics. Then, like I said, with the cycle of matter, matter going back and forth, back and forth. What makes matter do that? Is it cause and effect? What's their relationship? So obviously, they're kind of another thing, like they're codependent. So one needs the other. Can a cause have an does a cause need an effect? Because I feel like an effect needs a cause, right? You know, but then there's God. I believe in God. So what would be the cause of God? Well, he would be the all eternal cause. He wouldn't have a cause. He'd be eternally there. So that is something I think about. But when it comes to and then cause and effect also goes back to luck. So why is luck? What if you just get really unlucky and somebody just slams into the side of the car you're in? You didn't cause that to happen. You didn't try and put yourself in a dangerous situation, but you did go on the road. So how much of a risk are we taking when we think about all the effects they have, but there's a cause that we don't directly cause, but can still happen. That kind of goes into, okay, so what is the process of cause and effect? Well, we do something and then we get it's input output. What is the input? What is the output? Do these things directly correlate with each other, or how much I think I forgot the word, but in the communication process, there's something called, I think, oh, noise. So when you there's an encode, and then a messenger, and then there's the channel, and then there's noise in that channel. So what is the noise between the cause and effect in the mode of the process? Because your cause might be that you might eat, healthy every day for a whole year. That's your cause, and the effect is you get healthier. But what about all the things in the middle? What about all the junk food in your house, all the soda, everything in your house that's unhealthy, all the carbs, everything? What type of noise do those cause in the process that changes your cause? See, the word cause is so interesting because it's used a lot of different ways. But I really don't know how I'm using it here. But yeah. So determination, is everything predetermined? I don't think it is. Were you predetermined to wake up at this time, or maybe you would have laid in bed for a couple extra minutes? Maybe you don't have to wake up early, or maybe you do have to wake up early. It's predetermined most of the time that what time we're gonna wake up the next day. We set an alarm. But what determines that? Is everything predetermined? I mean, were you predetermined? Do we have? So this goes to the next two questions. Do we have free will, and what is free will? So I just want to get both of those said, so I can kind of talk about it all at once. Free will, it's a very interesting concept because what is it? Do we have it? And does it cause us to do things a certain way, or do we not have it? Is everything predetermined? Was I predetermined to make this video because I'm just interested in it, and then I was interested in it because of where I was born? Was I born there because, it could go back to the beginning of time. But what causes something like free will, Because some people think, okay, well, humans don't have free will. We're just chemical reactions in our brain giving good signals and bad signals. But then what would cause us to be disciplined and give something like delayed gratification? Well, people nowadays, they don't have the longest attention spans of all time. So what would cause somebody to withdraw from a drug, a drug that they're addicted to? What would cause them to stop? Because their body is telling them that it's good, and their mind is telling them that it's good. It makes their body feel good, even though it probably is harming their body. But they have free will. They have will itself, determination to not do something that's harming them. So if that's the case, then where are they getting this free will from? And then what does free will mean? What is free will? That's the last question I have on here. Does a millionaire have more free will than a poor person? A millionaire, yeah, he could maybe take a day off of work and not do anything, or do whatever he wants. He could go to an amusement park that's 3 hours away. He could have somebody drive them there. He could fly somewhere, and he could do whatever he wants. He could buy any video game he wants. He could rent any movie. He could rent out a building. Maybe he could go in a yacht, a car. I'm not rich, so I don't know what they do for fun all the time. I've heard some pretty weird stuff, but I digress. They Do they have more free will than what a poor person has? A poor person, they have to go to work, or even like a middle class person, they have to go to work so they can survive. Maybe not even if they're living paycheck to paycheck, but just so they can afford the things they bought. And what are they living above their means? Maybe they're not. But then that rich person, he's got to keep up these businesses. Now, what if you're born? What if you're born to a rich person? You don't have to keep up the businesses. What if you're 18? You've got a budget of $3 million. You can just spend your weekend doing whatever you want. Do they have more free will? Or what controls our free will as well? I would say one thing that controls free will, especially for men, is their ego. You know, you might want to walk away from a situation. You might not want to get in a fist fight or a fight or any type of fight, but somebody is egging you on, they're disrespecting you or somebody you love or somebody you care about. So your ego tells you, I can't let this slide. I can't let this get past me. So why is your ego determining your free will? What determines our free will? Is it our personality? And this goes back to identity. But not even really our identity, because it's more of our personality. Maybe you have anger issues. So if somebody starts egging you on, maybe not even on purpose, maybe they accidentally bump into you. Do you have free will? Or is the free will is what allows you to have the anger issues? So what I basically mean is, what controls the free will? Or is the personality control the free will, or does the free will control personality? Do we have the free will to be angry, or does our anger cause us to not have free will because Our mind is now in a box of this makes me angry, I can't control my anger, I have anger issues? Or is it that we have so much free will we're allowed to have anger issues? So I just think that's kind of the question that needs to be asked. And that kind of goes back to cause and effect. What was the first cause or what was the first effect? And it's kind of a circle. And that goes back to energy, transformation, matter. It all kind of, and that's the thing I love about philosophy and science and the world and math and English and history. It's all connected. It's all connected. Everything's connected. Math is connected to English. History is connected to science. Science is connected to philosophy. Philosophy is connected to psychology. Psychology is connected to economics. Economics is connected to business. Business is connected to health. Everything's connected. So why? Oh, I had another typo. Why is it important? You probably thinking this whole time, this stuff sounds so dumb, but these are some of the reasons I think it's important. Now, I had a little bit of nuance with my things here, but it helps us in general. It helps us learn about ourselves. Do we let our identity control us? Do we let our identity control our free will? Or I mean, we definitely let our identity control our decision making, or our personality, or our being. What is our being? I think it helps us learn about ourselves because it makes us ask questions that we never really would have asked before. We learn about ourselves and other people. It helps us learn about other people. Why did this person do this? What do they perceive their identity as? What do others perceive their identity as? It's very interesting, in my opinion. It helps us with existential crisis. I can't really say I've ever had an existential crisis, but I have had times where I'm just thinking, why are we here? What are we here for? But the idea that something like this exists and people are trying to figure it out, people are asking questions, even if they don't have answers, even if they have a million questions and zero answers. What the fact that this exists and that it's a thing that's existed for years. Humans have always wondered this. It just shows, you're not alone with this. Everybody thinks about it. And I also spelled the next thing wrong too, psychology. But it helps us learn about psychology, I think, a little bit. Because people, why do we ask these questions in the first place? Why? What is it that makes us want to know so badly why we're here? Who knows? We still haven't figured it out. Maybe we have. I'll have to do some more research. Helps us learn about the universe, not in the sense of a physical universe where we find, okay, chemistry, if you combine iron and gold, you get this. It's not necessarily that. It's more of, we ask, why is the universe here? What is it for? Because if it wasn't for those questions, why is the universe here? Then we wouldn't ask the questions, how can we discover more? And then we create something like a spaceship, And that's very, very simplified way to do it, or simplified way of putting it, but it's the truth. We ask questions like, why is the universe here? And then we figure out, well, let's find out. And then we build something, and then we get there, and then we still haven't figured it out yet. Maybe we never will. Maybe humans weren't meant to, but we don't know that yet. It helps us learn about the world. People ask, why does the world exist? Why does nature exist? And what constitutes something as natural? Just because rain fell out of the sky, does that make it natural? If you take that rain and boil it, is it still natural? Is it still natural water? I mean, maybe. I mean, it's not how it was. Humans altered it, but humans are natural. So, if you really think about it, every technology is just nature interacting with itself. Okay? But it's something like human greed or human envy. Is that natural? Someone say it's human nature, but is humans' nature natural? It's very hard sometimes to think about all these things because you can just keep on asking, why, why. But every question that can be asked probably has been. So it's not like this is something new, And we can condense these questions, or we could make them broad. That's the fun thing about metaphysics. And I'm going to do a lot more different philosophies. I didn't really even talk about any philosophers in this video, but metaphysics themselves are very interesting just because they're very broad. And I in a way, it's not a bad philosophy to start with because from here, it only probably get less confusing. But metaphysics themselves are just very broad, and they could ask almost anything. Consciousness, being, identity, personality, society, politics, nature, ethics, nationality, everything. You could even get into religion. So it's very interesting. But I think the next thing it helps us with is philosophy. It helps us learn about philosophies. Like, there's this one, I don't even remember the name, I think it's like, Sopilosophy. I don't even remember, but it's the idea that only you exist. When you stop looking in one direction, everything in that direction ceases to exist. When you leave work, all your coworkers, the building, the sky above your work doesn't exist anymore. And so why would that even become a thing? Or, why would that philosophy exist? And one might say, well, because we don't know. You can't prove that your coworker exists outside of work. I mean, you can call him, but what if that call creates the existence of them? Can you prove? I mean, and then people that know what the double slit experiment is. If you don't know what the double slit experiment is, I really recommend you look it up. You know, light waves. I think it's light waves. They behave differently whether being observed or they're not observed. Why is that the case? Some people think it's proof that we live in a simulation. Some people think it's proof of God, and some people have debunked it. But it's an interesting nonetheless. And then the last reason I have for why this is important is why should we not ask these questions? I mean, if we live in a reality where we have the privilege to ask questions. We don't live in a reality where, you know, we walk outside of our house, we have to defend ourselves with a weapon, or we gotta hunt food to survive. We have the privilege of going to work safely, getting a job, feeding ourselves. And I'm not saying there's no problems in the world right now. There's a plenty, but we have a little bit of free time sometimes. So why don't we not ask these questions? We have a lot of answers out there already for questions that have been asked. So let's come up with new questions. No solution would ever occur without a question being asked. So yeah, that's why I think it's important that we talk about this stuff. I'm not saying it's the most important thing in the world, no. I understand that it's a privilege to talk about this stuff and not talk about how can I, live and how can other people live. But I think it's important. And there's a lot more important stuff in the world. There's people that are dying, there's people that are being hurt, but this is something I do for fun. I try and be the best person I can, and so when I have free time and I talk about stuff like this, I do enjoy it, and I think it's a good to discuss because this could lead to good. This could lead. The more discussions we have, it's never hurtful to have a discussion about something, even if discussion is something horrible, something bad. It's still good to talk about it just so we can figure out what it is. Because if we're always just walking around with unsaid rules and things that don't need to be said, it's just nothing but assumptions. Once you sit down and actually talk to somebody about something, you realize a lot more than you think you would. So these are the key takeaways, I think, from this. So we got to seek to understand the universe and the world. The world, Earth, the universe, the solar system, the galaxy, everything. But not just that. We have to, from the smallest atom to the biggest multiverse, we have to seek to understand it. You have to never stop asking questions and never be satisfied, because once you're finally satisfied, that's when the universe, that's when you lost, because you think you got it all figured out. You think you understand the universe, but you don't, because the universe itself, maybe it wasn't meant to be understood. Maybe it was meant to be a forever illusion or a mystery. Because sometimes I think understanding is an illusion, and that's why people become complacent. Now this word, I don't even know how to say this, but I think it's ontology. Now this is the study of being and analyzing existence. So this is very similar to metaphysics, but this is the actual study of it. And so I could do a video on that, or I could do a video on something else. So let me know in the comments what you want to see a video of. But this really shows us, what is existence? Can you actually even examine it or study it like a science, like you can with something like nature, or like where you make it like a documentary on an animal. We can study the precipitation cycle. We can study, what happens when you set a piece of paper on fire. But can you study the being? Can you study existence and perspective and consciousness? And this psychology also kind of goes into that. Examine how the world is structured and why the world is this way. You know, why is Earth, what is it, like 70% water? Or is it 90% water? I think it's like 70 to 80% water. Our bodies are 78% water, It's just a little weird. Or like maybe like, I don't know. The Earth is like 60 to 80% water. Our bodies are like 60, 80% water. Why is that the case? You know? I mean, in the Earth, it's got like a mantle, a crust. Our bodies, they have like a heart, then the blood, then our skin, and then, our brain, maybe. It's very interesting in my opinion, because what is the structure of the world? Is it and there's different spheres when you go to outer space. There's like the atmosphere, and then there's like the aerosphere or something, and then the lithosphere, I think. And that's like meteorology, and that's another thing I find interesting. And then there's archaeology, and then you dig into the earth and you find things from old. Think you think, how do these things get buried? What did the earth do? Is the earth changing just like us? Are we changing separately from the earth? Is the earth changing separately from us? You could just ask so many questions with metaphysics all day. The next thing is analyze how people, minds, and matter interact with each other. And this kind of just goes into everything I'm saying, but your mind, your identity, your consciousness, how does that interact with the person you are and the people around you? I mean, there's been times where I've said something and then immediately I think, I shouldn't have said that. And the people around me, they take it completely different of how I meant it, or they don't get as upset as I thought I would. And then kind of vice versa. I say something, I can be a little unself-aware sometimes, but I do have the self-awareness to know that. So I don't know, but sometimes it's kind of hard to identify how somebody feels, because you never truly know. You can never go in their mind. Minds are the one thing that we truly have to ourselves. At least for now. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? But with matter, matter is almost like a separate entity from the mind and people. I mean, there's like a nouns are a person, a place, or a thing. So we have person, and then which is people, and then a thing, which is matter, and then I guess the place would be your mind. That's another connection I never even thought about, but I think that's kind of interesting. I've always saw nouns as a very interesting topic, because what is let me not get into that right now, but what is a noun, and how does matter interact with our minds? How does our mind interact with matter? And what it like I said, I've already talked about it, what is matter? I don't want to keep on, repeating myself. But the next question. Yeah, because I don't really know how to explain that one. I just like, how does everything interact with each other? Because like I said before, everything's connected. So I just, where do we find these connections? The next thing is keep in mind how change affects you and the people around you. Like I said before, how do you know you're a different person than you were yesterday? If you're not a different person than you were yesterday, then does that mean you're the same person you were 10 years ago or 20 years ago? I mean, obviously we grow, we used to be a baby now. You're a teenager, or you're a kid, or you're an adult, or you're elderly, or you're millennial, or no, well that's different, but how does change affect things? One would say change itself is the effect of something. But why? Why does change happen? If life itself and things like survival of the fittest and Darwinism, if those were true, then would change, I mean, that explains why living organisms change, because they evolve. But when would we ever get to a point where maybe change wouldn't even happen? And what if we get to the point where everybody's so similar, because survival of the fittest is means everybody's going to be as similar as possible, because that's the best way to survive. I don't know. That question is definitely a hard one to talk about, because the idea of how does change affect you isn't just like, okay, well, somebody died, or it's how does the idea of change, and it can be a little broader too, but it also could be like, how does somebody that they passed away, or how does somebody that you don't know, a millionaire, they made an extra $1,000, did that ever affect you? Maybe a dollar you spent somewhere went to the person that worked there, that dollar went to somebody else, and that's a little harder to quantify now that we have a lot of cash digitally, but in a way, everything's connected in that sense as well. And then the last question I have on here, or the last takeaway I have on here, is look at society and how it's been affected by the world. What do we not know or understand is kind of what I've had a lot of spelling errors on this. I'm gonna have to or grammar errors really. I'm gonna have to fix that. But just take a look at society. And it's going to be different for everybody, everyone, because the household you grew up in, the world you live in, the country you live in, the state you live in, the continent you live on. How does society look around you? Are you happy with it? Most people would probably say no, but that's probably been the case for all of history. I mean, look at the 80s. People would say like the younger generation's so soft and they don't know how to work. Every generation says that about the younger generation. And I think just now it's coming to light that it's another cycle. And I talked about cycles before, but they're not necessarily always good. But I digress. Take a look at the things around you and think about the things you don't understand and seek to understand them. Seek to understand the world. Seek to understand empathy. Seek to understand other people. And always be curious, even about things that we shouldn't ask. The questions we shouldn't ask are the most important ones, because they can lead to results we never even thought were possible. But I think that's going to be the end of this video. Yep, so if you liked the video, if you thought it was interesting, leave a like, leave a comment. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you want to see. And yeah, any future ideas, just leave them in the comments. Have a good one, everybody.